Before I get into the video, I just need to say that this is a review of the base game only, as it was delisted in 2018 and I bought the game in 2019. So I'm not going to talk about the Storm Island, the Fast and Furious, and the Porsche DLCs, as I have no way to play them, form an opinion of them, and get gameplay footage.
You've earned a skill point.
Playground Games hit the ground running with the first Forza Horizon in 2012, a game that got mainly 9s out of 10 and currently has a score of 85 out of 100 on Metacritic. But it was clear that the developers couldn't make the game that they wanted due to the game engine, which was a modified version of a game engine that was originally developed for a closed circuit racer. The result of that was an open world racing game that wasn't completely open world, which also ran at 30 frames per second instead of 60. But they managed to make a game that didn't have any slowdown or screen tearing on a console that by 2012 was getting on a bit. In 2013, Turn 10 Studios and Microsoft Studios released Forza Motorsport 5 as a launch title for the Xbox One. Even though the game had many issues, most of the good points had one thing in common: the then brand new Forza Tech game engine. This new game engine was for the Xbox One Forza titles and was made with open world games in mind. This meant that the Horizon games could finally have a fully explorable world. The first Forza Horizon game to use this new game engine was the second game, which was released in Q4 2014. There was also a release of Forza Horizon 2 on the Xbox 360 developed by Sumo Digital, which uses the game engine from the first game, but the less said about that, the better. You start the game arriving in Italy by boat. You then take a scenic drive along the coast to the festival in the then brand new Lamborghini Huracan, which is also the game's cover car. Once you get to the festival, you are greeted by the host Ben Miller, who is one of the most annoying characters that the series has ever had, and according to a Horizon story in the 5th game, is now selling hot dogs at the Horizon Festival in the UK, the setting for Forza Horizon 4. After a night of partying, Ben gives you a choice of 3 cars to start racing with: a BMW Z4, a 60s Chevrolet Camaro, and a Mark IV Toyota Supra. I prefer the way you started the first game a lot more. There's something about being forced to start from almost all the way at the bottom with a somewhat 20-year-old modified box, which adds a bit more character to the game. That got taken away from not just Forza Horizon 2, but the later games in the series as well. After your introduction race, you meet Ashley. She is the Horizon Festival's mechanic who is related to Dak, the mechanic from Horizon 1. That was something else that was mentioned in the 5th game. The premise of the game is pretty much the same as its predecessor, which is to become the best driver at the Horizon Festival. But the structure of the gameplay has changed quite a bit. In the first game, you did single races and earned points, which then got you new wristbands, and the new wristbands unlocked more events. You still unlock wristbands, but now they're tied to the leveling up system that was brought over from the motorsport games. And you don't unlock anything for getting them, except a wheel spin. But that's not really that special, as you get a wheel spin every time you go up a level. Forza Horizon 2 is the game that introduced the wheel spin feature to the Forza series, for better or for worse. Just like the first Forza Horizon, you get circuit races and point-to-point races. As I've already said a fair bit about them in my review of the first game, I won't talk about them in this review. But there are new event types that are all to do with rally and off-roading. You have Rally Circuit Race, Rally Point-to-Point, which really should be called Rally Stage, and you've also got Cross Country, which takes advantage of the open world. The new event types didn't seem to be enough for the developers, as you now have street races as part of the Horizon Championships, which can now make up between 25 and 50% of a championship. In the first game, the street races were separate from the festival events, as the Horizon Festival was all about racing legally on public roads. yet in a safe environment. But you throw all of that out the window when you introduce those street racers into the Horizon Festival. Luckily this was changed back for Horizon 3 2 years later. Each championship has 4 events, and all 6 regions has a championship for every type of car in the game, and that means you have 168 championships, which is equal to 672 races, not including the 2 or 3 long races around the map. I like that the developers made it so you don't complete everything within 20 hours, which was one of my main criticisms of the first game. But it does seem like they just structured the gameplay this way to make it last for the entirety of that 2-year release cycle. And the game starts to suffer from the same issues that Forza Motorsport 5 has, where it feels too repetitive as you're doing championship after championship on the same tracks. But at least they aren't as long as the championships in Motorsport 5. I prefer the way it was structured in the first game, where all of the events were separate from one another. And that's another thing that the developers went back to in the third game. Luckily the Horizon events aren't the only thing to do in this game, as you've also got the showcase events, which return from Horizon 1. Showcase events are races between a car and something that isn't a car, such as a plane, train or hot air balloon. I like these events as it's different from doing championship after championship, but I also don't really see the point of doing them as you don't get anything from them, like you did in the first Forza Horizon. You only get to keep the Ferrari 360 Stradale from the first showcase event, and that's it. There's also only 5 of them, which compared to the 10 you got in the first game is not a lot at all. But that's not so bad, as 3 of the showcase events in Horizon 1 could have been regular festival events. They are fun to do, but the developers could have added more and let you keep the car. They also could have spreaded them out a little bit more, as they were all unlocked and completed quite early on in the game. Another returning feature from the first game are the Barnfinds. There are 10 cars that are hidden in barns scattered around the map. Once you've progressed enough, Ashley will tell you about an abandoned car that has been left somewhere in a barn, and a circle will appear on your map. The car is in that circle, and that's just like the Barnfinds in the first game, but that's where the similarities end. Because Forza Horizon 2's map is more open, there are more places that the developers could hide barns. This was a massive problem in the first game due to the limitations of the game engine and the Xbox 360. The Barnfinds feature is much better in Forza Horizon 2 than it was in the first game, but it has the same issue as the showcase events, as they needed to be spread out a lot more, as after the last one you still have about 75% of the game to complete, which other than the bucket list is all championships, which as I said gets very repetitive. The bucket list is a new feature that is all about what you'd want to do before you die. The events in the bucket list are all about getting a certain amount of skills points, either by drifting or getting air skills, but there are some where you have to drive through a speed trap over a set speed, or driving to a destination before you run out of time. Overall, there are 55 bucket list challenges to complete, or 45 if you don't have the Porsche DLC. Those 45 to 55 bucket list challenges are split up into 3 or 4 groups. Again, whether or not you have the Porsche DLC. I think the bucket list challenges are the best way to break up the championships, as there are quite a lot of them, and I'm glad they returned in the later games. In the first game, one of the things that you had to do to progress was make your way to number 1 in the popularity chart, and you did this with the skills points that you acquired by drifting, getting air, having near misses with the AI and driving at speed for prolonged periods of time. You still do all of that in Forza Horizon 2, but the purpose of the skills points have changed. Instead of using them to unlock more of the game, you spend them on perks. These perks either allow you to get skills points quicker with 10% increases in your skills chains, gives you more XP, discounts on cars from the auto show, discounts on upgrades, and various online stuff that I won't talk about in this review, mainly because the servers for the game have shut down. I think it does make more sense to use the skills points in this way, but you do end up unlocking everything quite early on in the game. And I think that is why the developers just expanded on the idea for every game released after. Overall, I like Forza Horizon 2's gameplay, but what I don't like is its progression. It seems like the developers tried to make the game open-ended without actually making it open-ended, by prolonging the life of the game with the 168 championships, whilst giving you not much else to do after about 33% of completion. And so after 20 hours of playing it, it just feels too repetitive. You don't actually get anything for completing all 168 championships, which I think is a bit of an oversight. The progression and the gameplay needed more development time, and every championship, Barnfind and showcase event needed to be spread out more. To me, it looks like the developers' primary goal of this game was for it to be mainly online orientated, which is pointless now as the online servers have shut down. But all those small issues that I have with the speed of the progression and the order you have to do things in goes away when I'm driving through the incredible versions of France and Italy that Playground Games created. The developers made a short list of places to set the game, including California and Australia, but in the end they chose the border between France and Italy, which was one of their choices for Forza Horizon 1 and actually almost made it into the first game alongside Colorado. They did an amazing job with their own versions of the south of France and the north of Italy. On the French side of the map, you have the towns of Nice, Sisteron, and Saint Martin. On the Italian side, you have San Giovanni, Montalino, and Castelletto. Not only that, you also have the Horizon Festival in almost the middle of the map, and various medieval ruins, castles, and a few areas to mess around in, such as the dockyard, an airstrip, and a rundown industrial area. Every town and village have their own look, with areas to explore. Even though the map only contains one biome, that was very common for the time. But the developers put detail into almost every square inch of the map. And even though it's not as big as the maps in the later games, or even other open world racing games that were out at the time, for only 2 years of development, on what was then a brand new console in 2014, it is massive. And to a large extent, I feel the same way about other aspects of the game, such as the car list. Forza Horizon 2 had 200 cars at launch, and every month for a year after the game's release there were a few cars added as DLC. At the time, 200 cars was a lot for an open world game. It's around the same as what the first game had with DLC, and 3 times more than the amount of cars in Test Drive Unlimited 2, which was the most recent Test Drive Unlimited game, being around 3 years old at the time. It's more than what you get in some open world racing games today. It has about 60 cars more than Need for Speed Unbound, but a large car list is nothing if it doesn't have a large variety of rare and interesting cars. So you do get common hatchbacks such as the Ford Fiesta, Alfa Romeo Giulietta, and every generation of the Volkswagen Golf up to 2014, but you also get supercars from manufacturers such as Ferrari, McLaren, Lamborghini, and Pagani. Those are cars that you would expect to find in not just Forza Horizon, but also other racing games as well. What you don't expect to see are things like the Ford Transit, Volkswagen Type 2, a 1960s Mini, or a Willys Jeep. People don't like cars such as these as they are seen as meme cars. I disagree with that. If you only include mainly sports cars and supercars, then the game starts to get boring. I feel the same way about the first Test Drive Unlimited, which was about 75% sports cars and supercars. The cars in Forza Horizon 2 look amazing. Just like the fifth motorsport game, a lot of the car files were taken from the Xbox 360 era Forza games. There's nothing wrong with that. It's only when you start putting car assets from a game that plays in 1080p into a game that plays in 4K without re-rendering the assets in development, then the car assets look like they have a downgrade in quality, as everything around them is made from scratch at the new standard. But in Horizon 2, it's fine, as the Xbox 360 and the early Xbox Ones are both 1080p consoles. It's only when you get to the later Forza games in the 9th generation, that's when people started to notice the Xbox 360 assets more and more. I don't mean to sound like a stuck record, but this being a Forza game, you are able to upgrade and customize your car. So you can upgrade your engine, suspension, brakes, remove weight, and do various other things that you've been able to do since the Forza franchise began in 2005. But there are a few things that you can do in this game that you couldn't do in the first Forza Horizon, such as driveline conversions. So like converting a front-wheel drive car to all-wheel drive. Engine swaps were a lot crazier than they ever have been. You can put a massive V8 into a Ford Fiesta. But with all of the engine upgrades, that does make it very undrivable and unusable for racers, even with the all-wheel drive conversion.
400 meters, turn right.
Another thing that the first Forza Horizon was missing was car tuning, so you were stuck with the base tunes. Forza Horizon 2 takes its tuning feature from the fifth motorsport game, which was one of the very few things that I liked about it. Forza Horizon 2 also takes the customization aspect from Forza Motorsport 5 as well. It's largely unchanged from Motorsport 4 and the first Horizon, but the developers did add more colours and patterns. So you can make your car look like a test mule with the camo with the swirls. You can also put other types of camo on your car, or you can pretend you're in the Middle East with the gold paint. Even though it's not an improvement over Forza Motorsport 5, it is an improvement on what the first Horizon had to offer in terms of customization. According to a lot of people, this is the best Horizon game, and even though it isn't my favourite, I can see why people love it. The sense of explorability that we never got in a game like this up until 2014, the vast variety in the car list and the really well detailed map makes this one hell of a good game, but it does have its faults. The progression isn't that good, and overall, there just needed to be a little bit more of everything, with side events and challenges being spread out a bit better. Nonetheless, it is a game that I highly recommend, but if you are going to buy Forza Horizon 2, then just bear in mind that all of the online aspects have been discontinued. This has been my review of Forza Horizon 2 on the Xbox One. I did think about also reviewing the Xbox 360 version of the game as well, but I don't really see the point in doing so. The next review is not going to be of a Forza game, as I want a change. So I've been looking at my unfinished reviews, and I think I know what game I'm going to review next. And I guarantee none of you are going to be able to guess what game it is. It's a game that is considered one of the worst racing games on the PlayStation 2, and it's a game that has some very confusing vehicle licensing. It is going to be a very negative review, but I think it's well deserved. If you liked this review, then give it a like. If you didn't, then that's your problem, and if you want to see more, then please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.